Hi there. In this lecture we see Bobby Fischer's use of d3. So this game is against Oscar Panno in the 1970 Buenos Aires tournament, round 8. e4, c5. Now Fischer didn't usually play d3 immediately. He disguised his intention for a King's Engine attack. In fact, after knight f3, in particular after e6, he chooses d3. This becomes much more frequent, the use of d3 here against e6. So one aspect of this is that sometimes, if black's playing for d5 later and white plays e5, white gets to overprotect the e5 square or pawn. And also against the French defence in general, by the way, which is e6 straight off the bat, d3 is quite popular at master level for tackling the French defence. So here it's a kind of, the French move e6 delayed. So knight f3, e6, and here d3. So a number of amazing Bobby Fischer games are in this line. So we see knight c6, and this is one of them. g3, g6, bishop g2, bishop g7, white castles, knight ge7, rook e1, d6. And here it looks as though that, well, there's no overprotection of e5, black's ready. But white constructs that with c3 now for d4 and in construction of an e5 point. Black castles, d4, and black actually plays here c takes d4, c takes d4, and indeed d5. If queen b6, this is interesting. If d5, knight e5, black gets an interesting position here actually. And if black takes on b2, black can live to tell the tale. White's advantage is small, but it's there. White still has an advantage in this fictional scenario. But anyway, d5 keeps things kind of closed. So e5, we get this position where there aren't too many tactics. It's the French defense pawn chain, essentially, with a classic kind of bad bishop, in a way. But against the fianchetto, is this effective? Bishop d7, knight c3, rook c8, bishop f4, so building up on that strong point, e5. But also this facilitates a move like queen d2 and bishop h6 in the right circumstances. We see knight a5, rook c1, b5, and now b3, depriving the knight of c4, b4, knight e2, bishop b5, queen d2, knight ac6, and now here, what would you play with white in this position for 200 positional points and tactical points? There's a move which Fischer played which is actually super important. It really is super important from various angles, in fact. It avoids a trap. That's one of the main things. g4, avoiding a major trap. A major trap would be to carry on with the routine bishop h6, and this perhaps happens so often in our blitz. We've got an idea set in mind and we pursue it regardless of the particular features of the position. But we've always got to factor in generally as high priority tempo gaining moves, and if the queen's around, there's a horrible aspect to tempo gaining here. Black could play bishop takes h6, queen takes, and now knight f5, tempo gain. So there's no chance for knight g5 to attack h7. The queen is repulsed. And not only that, here, bishop takes e2. Black is actually winning a centre pawn in broad daylight, like this. Yeah, black's winning a centre pawn. However, it's cut or sliced. If rook takes e2, knight c takes d4. So if rook takes c8, there's knight takes e2 check. And if knight takes, rook takes c1 check and knight takes d4. Yeah, this is just horrible, losing a pawn for nothing, basically. And all the attacks gone as well. So g4 is very important. Not only it stops knight f5, it facilitates knight g3, it vacates g3. And this could be a heroic attacking piece, potentially, even though it looks restricted. We'll see that in a moment. a5, knight g3, queen b6. So white has got this position where white's able to attack quite smoothly now with h4, with minimal fuss, with minimal counterplay from black. And this is actually this is one of the core reasons why, I had one season where I had bad results to the French defence and switched the next season to Sicilian defence and got much better games. Sometimes I had situations with black in French defence structures which were kind of devoid of counterplay. This is a horrible situation to have with black, where the opponent's given a free hand, a free hand to do what they want on the king side. And what can you do here with black? The position's so closed, there's not many tactics to speak of. Knight b8 is played, and now bishop h6. Black's king safety is being reduced here. Knight d7, queen g5, rook takes, bishop takes. This significantly reduces black's king safety, but white's going to play bishop takes g7 at some point anyway. So this is very dangerous with the queen near the king. Rook c8, and in fact Fischer permits an exchange of rooks here. Rook takes c8, knight takes c8, and now h5. The centre is very stable and the attack's persistent here. Queen d8, knight g5, knight f8, and now there's an absolutely wonderful move that Fischer plays here to improve the attacking pressure immediately in the position. I wonder if you can spot it for 200 points. White's play here. Intensifying the attacking pressure with bishop e4, believe it or not. Yeah, with the knight tied down to h7, we see queen e7. If d takes e4, knight takes e4 with the big idea of knight f6 check. So, knight d6 is desperate. That's desperate, This is absolutely desperate, but what does black actually do? The idea here of knight f6 check and then knight takes f7, potentially, as example, knight f6 check and knight takes f7 if nothing else. That's brutal. So yeah, this would be absolutely brutal, this position. So okay, so if a4 h takes, the bishop is usefully pointing at h7 here, x-raying h7 as well. So guess what? White can play here. Yeah, to exploit that x-ray, to further that x-ray, knight h5, trying to open up that bishop to h7. So if g takes, bishop takes h7 check, and this is just mating. Yeah, or king h8, knight f7, checkmate. So brutal stuff on a4, brutal stuff on d takes. Yeah, so so queen e7 was played, but now, yeah, the attack still continues. So how would you proceed the attack in this position for 100 points? Yeah, knight takes h7, so threatening knight f6 check. So that's taken, but now h takes, f takes. If d takes, queen takes h7 check, and queen h8 is checkmate. So f takes, we have bishop takes g6, and now knight g5 is played. If queen g7, white actually takes on h7, and this is problematic. There's things like queen takes e6 check if queen takes. So say king f8, queen f4 check. Yeah, white's just winning this position. This is a winning endgame. White is 2 pawns up. Okay, so knight g5 here, but now knight h5, and look at this big idea of knight f6 check here. Black's had it. The king saved. These pieces are away from the king. It's just too much. The king's too weak. Knight f3 check is played. King g2, knight h4 check, king g3. Knight takes g6, and now what's the most incisive move here by far? What would you play in this position for 100 points? The most incisive move by far is knight f6 check. Not, get the piece back. If queen takes g6, get a piece back. White is a piece down, but funny enough, this position is still winning. It's so overwhelming. This position, White's still like technically winning here, even though a piece down. White's got enough pawns and other stuff to compensate. But no, knight f6 check is more to the point. After king f7, queen h7 check, and black resigned. Black is actually getting checkmated. So if the king moves to f8, queen g8 is checkmate. So the magical thing about this game is that when we see model games like this with minimal counterplay, that's the sort of thing we really want in our games. Sort of one-way street games to emulate. There were hardly any tactical opportunities for black, for white to worry about. It was like a worry-free game. You know, we want worry-free stuff in general, in life, you know, ideally. And this is like a worry-free game to try and emulate. And it's with this delayed d3, which is why I've tried to go out my way in this course not to show d3 just on the second move, because I'm aware of Bobby Fischer classic games, especially after e6. So we see here, in a nutshell, going for c3, d4 and an overprotection of e5, and how dangerous that stranglehold on the position can be with black having minimal counterplay. In fact, you know, I think that's one of my good friend John Nader, rest in peace, he used to say, like, to get a bind first before the attack. If you have worry-free attacking chess, that's the sort of chess you're statistically more likely to win rather than permit counterplay. And here, yeah, one key move to bear in mind, though, is this move g4, not going all in immediately with bishop h6, like many of us weaker players than Fischer would go all in with bishop h6. We've got to factor in the key tempo gainers. We can't just be excited that there's a queen on h6 and knight g5 coming. The queen itself is a major tempo gainer. And sometimes, you know, the opponents are going to leave their queens for tempo gains as well. We've got to make sure to factor in the tempo gains, especially on queens. Virtually in any position, it's generally, as a general advice, it's useful to look at the forcing moves. And when there's queens around, there's forcing moves around, generally. So you've got to investigate those. But so bishop h6, natural but bad, just racking the position. So g4, and it's funny that even though these pieces seem, you know, restricted with the e4 square, Fischer proved the latent resources here of the e4 square in a beautiful manner. So I found this a very beautiful game indeed, how there's even more attacking resources than you'd think. If it's only queen and knight, but the e4 square is available to white. That is a wonderful use, and the bishop really coming into its own here in these variations. You know, so if a4, just to recap, you know, h takes, and you know, horrible things are afoot here. You know, so yeah, it's a really fun game in my view, this game, and yeah, it's good to be on the lookout for these games in my view, where especially it did seem like a one-way street. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much.